doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The next interviewee is Shalana Millard. Shalana is a writer and lighthouse aficionado living in Washington, D.C. She was one of the podcast's first regular listeners, and she's co-hosted a couple of times. So here's Shalana. So, Shalana, nice to see you again. Thank you for doing this today. So I just have one question for you, okay? And that question is, what has been your most memorable lighthouse experience?
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm so glad to join you today. Thank you for having me. My most memorable lighthouse experience is my very first visit to Absecon Lighthouse. As I reflect on that, I think, I got up that morning and it was just the general excitement of going to my first lighthouse. I'd been wanting to do that for so long. So I got up that morning, was so excited. But outside of just that, excitement, one of the things that stands out to me that day is the camaraderie among other people who were visiting the lighthouse. So at Absecon, it's 228 steps. Their tagline is 228 steps, one amazing journey. And as you go up, they have multiple landings that you can stop and, take a rest and maybe look out the window, get a different view of Atlantic City, and then continue. And what I remember so much about that day was as I was making my way up, I had stopped at one of the landings, to catch my breath. And there were a few folks coming down. They'd been to the top. They were making their way back down. And they just looked at me and they said, the view up there is so worth it. And I just love that encouragement. It's like, there were these were other people that had already been up there and they were coming back down and they saw someone making their way up and they were encouraging me saying, the view up there is so worth it. And that just gave me that extra push that I needed to continue that climb up those 228 steps. And so I made my way to the top and they were absolutely correct. The view is so worth it. The other thing that stands out to me about that day was Buddy Grover, the late Buddy Grover. He was the lightkeeper on duty that day when I made my first climb, and I made my way to the top. And just immediately, you got this sense that he was someone who truly was passionate about the lighthouse, obviously very knowledgeable. In life, there are some people that immediately when you encounter them, this is someone that I'm going to remember. And Buddy was that person and just so enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the lighthouse. And I still have my first, I saw the light card that he happened to sign that day. So just encountering him. And by the way, I love, the tribute that you paid to him during the recent virtual telethons. That was awesome. So those are really some of the things that stood out to me about my first visit to Absecon.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. So I got to go there for the first time myself this past May.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, I was there at a time when I don't think there was anybody else going up or down the time I happened to be there, but the staff, the volunteers there were just fantastic. Everybody was so nice and welcoming. And I've featured Absecon on the podcast
Yeah.
a few times now. And I had Buddy Grover, those legendary volunteer. He, I believe, passed away within this past year at 96. I believe it was
I
96.
believe so. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just an incredible guy, such an optimistic, cheerful kind of guy. And I'm so happy I had him on the podcast as well.
Absolutely. Absecon is just an amazing place. And one other visit, my third visit there also stands out to me. That was a nighttime climb.
Mm.
And during that one, I saw that the lighthouse really does take on a different feel at night.
Yeah.
They had a full moon climb and I've always wanted to do that. So I went to Atlantic City just for that. And boy, did the lighthouse take on a different feel at night. So that visit also stands out to me. But that very first one is what is truly magical.
It's interesting that both Shalana and Sarah mentioned Absecon Lighthouse in New Jersey as a peak experience. It's a great one for sure, with a group of very capable and hospitable staff and volunteers. Next is Ben Ridings. Ben is the curator for Cape May MAC, the organization that manages the Cape May Lighthouse in New Jersey. I met him when I interviewed him at Cape May Lighthouse, and since then he's co-hosted a couple of times, including